Good afternoon, good morning. It's Mark Johnson from Loyalty 360. I hope everyone's happy, safe, and well. Want to welcome you back to another edition of Loyalty Live. As you know, in this series, we talk to the leaders in customer channel and brand loyalty about the technology, trends, and best practices that impact a brand's ability to drive unique experiences, enhance engagement, but most importantly, drive customer loyalty. In the month of April, we embarked on a mini-series of Loyalty Live sessions looking forward to the trends that will likely shape the months ahead. So today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Jake Kiser, who's the Chief Customer Officer at Stuzo. Jake, how are you today?
Good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. First off, for those who don't know what Stuzo is or who Stuzo is, kind of give us a little background on what you guys are and what you do.
Stuzo is a loyalty and commerce activation company focused primarily in the everyday spend retail vertical, helping our customers get to know and activate more of their customers using our technology and building on top of it.
Okay, great. Collectively, I think everyone's been through a lot in COVID last year. Hopefully things continue to get better, but it's definitely impacting a brand's ability to drive customer loyalty. What are you seeing as some of the primary ways consumers have changed over the last year?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a great point. We talk a lot about it. I think consumers have shifted their habits really to align with whatever we're defining as our new normal. I feel like that term's been overused a bit, but right. What that's probably meant more than anything is some more online shopping than we've seen in the past, adoption, of newly available options like curbside pickup, probably less store visits and physical store visits. And I think in many cases, consumers are actually using digital technology and things like contactless payment as an example for the first time, which is likely a behavior that's going to stick around for a while as we continue to open up and things get back to normal for us. I think probably see some of that stuff stick around more than maybe we envisioned, a year ago.
Okay. In kind of response to some of the changes that we're seeing, we did a trend issue in Q1. It was the kind of online magazine looking at trends that we actually interviewed and kind of the members, the suppliers, the partners about what they are seeing. So there were top 3 trends highlighted in the Q1 magazine: data integration, personalization, and agility. We see that from a brand perspective as well. So when you look at data integration, data is growing in importance and impact, but how to kind of make it actionable, how to simplify it, how to bring some clarity to it is a big challenge for brands. How do you think brands should be looking at not only how they're gathering data, but how they're using data to meet, exceed the customer expectations and to drive customer loyalty?
Yeah, I think, first it's important that brands understand, recognize that in order to gather this valuable data, they need to make it valuable for the consumer to share it. I think so often we talk about gathering data or collecting data, but you need to do it in a frictionless and painless way if you want your consumers to share that information with you. So, in many cases, it might be something like asking to join a loyalty program with as little as a phone number to begin that relationship. I think once you've maximized that total addressable audience, so the folks that would share data with you, by making it simple, safe, and frictionless for them to do so, it's imperative that you embrace the concept of progressively building that data over time. So don't ask for everything up front. Don't even pretend like you know everything you want to ask for up front, but use the data as you continue to build your understanding of the consumer to ask more engaging and more impactful questions that allow you to collect even better data that's going to drive the consumer experience. And I think, generally it's just the constant evolution of that experience should be based on the data you collect. The customer, if they're sharing something with you, expects to get something in return. And I think, one of the things that I would say brands can do more of is they can drive, meaningful engagement for the consumer by the data they understand about them, and they can do it in as real time as possible.
Absolutely. I know what we continue to see, third-party data is kind of going the way of the dodo bird. It's not as impactful anymore. Prism data is still used. First-party data is very important, but declared data, zero-party data is becoming more and more essential for brands to kind of gather and use and leverage. What are you seeing with regard to zero-party data, and how should brands be thinking about that, integrating that into their current data sets?
Yeah, first and foremost, zero party data is absolutely the most valuable data a brand can, own on its customer, because it's being given to you with the express consent of that consumer, and it's being given to you for the intended purpose of creating a better and more personalized consumer experience. There really isn't a whole lot of ambiguity around why a consumer would share those data points with you, the brand. So once you have that data, it's important to use it to create incremental outcomes for yourself, but also new and engaging experiences, offers, and events for the consumer that really tie that data into how they engage with you and your brand. And I think brands that make sure that that data exchange is reciprocal in terms of benefit will be the ones that ultimately will have used that zero party data to differentiate themselves from their competitors.
Absolutely. The next trend that we saw was personalization. Everyone's focused on personalization. Brands know that it's something they need to do. They're challenged with how to get there often, whether it's technology or best practices or consulting. But we continue to hear more about hyper personalization. What does hyper personalization mean to you, and how do you see that trend going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, hyper personalization probably has, 10 synonyms, maybe more. But for me, it's really this idea of one-to-one intelligent marketing. So it ties into what we just talked about with zero party data, first and foremost, is you can't have a hyper personalized experience without basing it on something about you, Mark, or me, Jake. It can't be general application anymore to be hyper personalized. In most cases, I think retailers are leveraging technology that really struggles to make data like that actionable in real time on that one-to-one level. And so hyper personalization is something we don't see a whole lot of today. My opinion is that, as soon as a consumer, as soon as my data is shared with you as a brand, whether I've offered it to you through building my profile, whether I've bought something, whether I've transacted, whether I've entered a sweepstakes, whether I've checked some box, spun some wheel, the expectation is that you guys should very quickly enhance my experience as a consumer based on that new understanding of me. If you're doing that, if you're embracing that, I think you're delivering on this promise of hyper personalization. And it has to be that, Mark and Jake can walk into the same store as a part of the same loyalty program, but do different things, and we should get very different experiences. That would be the result that a consumer would look for. And I think that would be the definition of hyper personalization from my perspective.
Okay. Looking at hyper personalization, there's going to be a cost associated with that. And that's something I know people who run customer loyalty programs struggle with, is especially if you don't have the right technology, kind of the causal relation between personalization and increased consumer engagement and therefore purchasing. How should brands be looking at a way to track or measure kind of the relationship as you get more personal, doing it at scale, and having the potential ROI, or at least a measurement around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one is to sort of take a big step back and start by identifying whatever the targeted outcome you're trying to drive at a macro level is as a business. So it's great to do very personalized offers, but if they don't tie back to some specific organizational outcome you're trying to drive, like increasing your members that enroll, selling more of a specific product, driving a certain amount of trips with a specific audience, if you don't know that first, it's very difficult to ever say this thing drove that outcome. So that's first and foremost. I think once you have that initial sort of outcome you're trying to drive, use data to understand who represents the best opportunity to drive those outcomes. I think that's the first step that a lot of people jump over. They say, hey, we're going to start with, we need to sell this thing and more of it. And then they go, okay, well, now we're just going to create this hyper targeted offer and people are going to do it. I think the first thing is use the data, understand who is the best opportunity for you to create that outcome with. And then the second part of that is to make sure you're not cannibalizing some existing behavior. Often we'll see people that can do that type of targeting, but then they're doing it towards somebody that would already be driving that outcome without an offer or without an experience or without bonus points. I think, at the end of the day, having that one-to-one relationship with each member and a platform in place that kind of spans that entire member experience between loyalty and commerce and how they engage with your brand at every touch point allows a transparent way really to track and measure the relationship between the offers and experiences that I'm served inside of a program and the outcomes that you intend to achieve. I think, from a Stuzo perspective, we think very much about this exact thing. And I think it's important for folks that are providers in our space to focus on what the outcomes that we drive are and be able to prove, efficacy of our technology, but also return on investment. And we've seen a lot of this in recent past with us, but one of our customers just went live with some of their initial numbers, and it's just an example of how you can create the connection. And that Cefco, which is a fuel and convenience operator in Texas, who just went live, in the first 60 days, they had outcomes where they were measuring against the past program, and they saw things across transactions being up 80%, active members being up 240%, and member enrollments being up 115%. That's how you set a foundation for being able to show that hyper-personalization is driving organizational outcomes.
That's awesome. And that you really touched on what I was going to ask next. Do you have some case studies that show how hyper-personalization works? And that those kind of numbers definitely show how to make it work. That's great. Last kind of trend we saw throughout the last 2 years is agility. We hear a lot about it. So brands have not only had to keep up with their technology internally, and they also noticed the number of limitations they had. Maybe not flexibility to do messaging, or if Iowa's shut down and Ohio's open, how do you manage that? Obviously not as impactful now. We're changing the kind of reward structures or even the automation pieces. So, how important, but also maybe how challenging was it, some things you saw with brands to be nimble, to want to do things with the program, platform, processes, but maybe weren't able to do it. So, how important was it, and how did they address some of the challenges they saw?
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of things are coming to my mind right now. I think, and I'll try to touch on a few of them, but I think in short, it's really important. The past year, like you said, has demonstrated that, brands need to be flexible and nimble. And I think maybe to the point you were making is that wasn't necessarily the case before Q1 of 2020. Brands could be brands and they could do it their way. And oftentimes that worked. We saw that, being agile was a very important element of having success over the past 15 months or so. I do believe while it was difficult for us to adjust, both our brands that we work with, their customers that shop there, as well as suppliers of those, I do think there's some good to come out of it. I think what you're seeing is that brands are identifying that there's a requirement to be consumer first. And that if you can serve the consumer, and again, you can work within the bounds in some cases that were unthinkable 15 months ago, of having to shut stores down, open them up, deal with things like, the crisis of having physical change to give out in stores and having to go credit cards only, having to think about how the labor market has been impacted, especially in the everyday retail vertical, and how to manage store hours because you can't hire enough people. There's so many different things happening right now in these industries that we work in. I think at the end of the day, everybody's going to look back and say, the one thing we learned was that putting the consumer at the center of our business and focusing on their needs was what allowed us to continue to succeed during these, what were effectively very crazy times for everybody.
Okay. Technology is very important. We just released a technology report last month. We have a bigger report on customer loyalty coming out, kind of an analyst report. It's a big challenge for marketers, getting the right technology right, integration, APIs, SDKs. They don't necessarily always have some of the staff on hand to really help them make them decisions and those decisions. And you have a very robust and kind of flexible platform. But how big of a challenge is that for some of the brands that you see, potentially even some that you kind of move over to your platform, right? What are some of the challenges they see in getting the technology right, getting integration right, that allows them to get to that personalization, to enhance the customer experience? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of two challenges that happen in the scenario laid out. The first one is sort of aligning on a strategy on how technology is going to enable them to achieve those goals that they have set out in terms of, creating, connection with their customer and leveraging that to drive incrementality and value. And obviously the outcome being sort of long-term customer loyalty. Once they align on how technology is going to play a piece there, I think the second piece is a little tougher, which is,
right.
We can't rip everything out today and be live tomorrow. So, what we've seen a lot of people do, and I think it's been a very successful approach, which is to say, let's start with the first and most important thing, which is we need to get technology in place that allows us to get to know as many of our customers as possible and activate them in a positive and incremental way for our business. And then over time, we can add in other pieces of that technology that are going to expand, the way we engage with them across loyalty, across digital commerce, and across a variety of frictionless experiences. So, whether it's Murphy USA, who's had a very successful program launching, with phone number only as the main engagement channel at in-store and at the pump, and using that to build a robust membership, a membership over time. Or, going back to the Sufco example where you have them opting to start first with loyalty and then, adding payments in digital commerce later this year. I think at the end of the day, picking a technology provider that allows you to set the foundation for what you can do and continually build on top of that and drive incremental outcomes along the way is really what we've seen people have a lot of success with.
Okay, great. So when you look at kind of technology, there's a lot of opportunity for brands, but I think there's a lot of confusion. Artificial intelligence and neural networks, machine learning, is it just a regression analysis or is it truly learning? What are some of these technologies that brands should be looking at to be nimble? And do you think there's potentially a challenge with regard to how they're understood or how they're even talked about within the market that hinders some of that acceptance and from the brands?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. It probably has come through a little bit in the way I've answered these is that, again, I would ask the question of, great, I now that I understand, this new technology or this new acronym that's going to help me do these things, what does it mean for me as a brand? What outcomes is it going to drive? I think that's the first thing that a lot of technology struggles to answer. I think the second thing is that, if I'm going to make an investment, the investment's not just in your technology, it's also in training my staff. It's in integrating this. It's in making this a part of my larger tech stack. And so, great, I have to pay you X for your technology. Well, there's actually a much larger soft cost associated with that. And I need to justify that as well. I think where we've seen folks and retailers, both in our vertical that we focus in and others, have the most success is when they've really focused on, not just doing things because they're sort of the shiny object, but instead, identifying something that they need to achieve and focusing on that. And I would say the themes that have been most prevalent would be, wherever something can be automated to save time, to save money, or to mitigate risk. That's been incredibly successful over the last, year or so, and I think will continue to be. And then anytime you can personalize anything for your consumer, and in some cases your associates or employees, those have been the other places. And so if you're doing that by leveraging AI, wonderful. If you're leveraging machine learning, wonderful. But those things as they stand alone, they aren't things you make investments in. You make investments in solving your organizational challenges or achieving new outcomes. And there's a variety of technologies that help you do that.
Okay, absolutely. And it's great to hear your perspective on that for sure. I think that adds some clarity. Last question I have is, what other trends do you think brands should be considering going forward in 2021? Are there things that you're seeing, trends, best practices, even technology that brands are asking for, or even if they're not, they should be considering to help them with their customer engagement, customer loyalty strategies?
I mean, yeah, we talked about some of this stuff, but I'll just, I guess, reiterate a few of them. So, number one is anytime you can get to a one-to-one personalized experience, that's going to play a pivotal role as we move from today forward. Like anything that you as a consumer expect with your favorite retailer, favorite brand should feel as personalized as possible moving forward. And investments in making that a reality are going to pay off, today and tomorrow as we go on. I think, from that perspective, the ability for marketers to be able to achieve that through automation, enabling the ability for the marketer to focus on specific outcomes like increasing share of wallet or driving additional visits from a specific group of members without cannibalizing existing behavior, because they're using technology to enable them to really see who their customers are, how they can target, how they can automate that process. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Right.
I think everybody talks about this concept of unifying customer data. That's very, really important, I think, and that really plays into the conversation we had earlier about zero-party data. And my last piece here, too, I think, is anytime you can remove friction from the consumer experience, you're going to win. And I don't mean that you have to put in all new technology or you have to open up an Amazon Go type store. It just means thinking about every step of your customer's journey and how you can improve that experience to the point where they want to come shop with you or they want to spend their money with you as a brand, or as a retailer, because you've made it easy and you've connected with them on a one-to-one level. And any investment you can do there is going to be valuable for you today and moving forward, in our opinion.
Absolutely. Well, Jake, I think it's great hearing from you. Some of the things you're seeing are definitely very germane to our audience, and challenges that you've addressed. And from a kind of a brand perspective or a client perspective, obviously you should help them. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. It was great to hear what you guys are doing, and look forward to catching up with you later this year for sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
And thanks everyone for listening. Remember to join back Friday at 1 when we have another edition of Low Flag. Thank you very much.